Hey, welcome to our presentation. Is going to be Gotta Catch 'em All is going to be a way to make those student interactions that you have during orientation super effective. So my name is Shaylin Patel.
And my name is Gracie Meyer, and Shayla and I are Orientation Leader Coordinators at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. An Orientation Leader Coordinator is a second-year orientation leader who's returning to help train and mentor the new team.
So the University of Alabama at Birmingham is also known as UAB, and it is a medium-sized institution. That means that there are roughly 14,000 undergraduate students here, and it is located in the largest city in Birmingham, which means it's an urban campus.
Including us, UAB has 18 orientation leaders who lead 17 freshman summer sessions, and around 165 students attend each of these sessions. Those students get split up into 8 groups of around 20, and each group is led by 2 orientation leaders.
Hopefully, by the end of this conversation, you will be able to identify the Pokemon types of students that you see at orientation.
Also, you'll have strategies to effectively interact with each type of student.
Using those strategies, hopefully you can empower those students to connect with their peers.
Finally, we're going to wrap it up with learning what type of student each of us tend to relate to and developing strategies to combat those tendencies. So I want you all to think back to when you were a student attending orientation. Try to remember every single detail of that day. What was going through your mind? What were you wearing? Who were you with? But most importantly, how were you feeling? Some of you might say that you were excited or nervous or even scared. I know personally I was like all of those emotions and many more. It was just a roller coaster of emotions. And a lot of students go through that roller coaster of emotions too. And that's because a lot of them want to be the very best like no one ever was. But if they don't have the proper knowledge and resources, they're never going to get past Route 1.
And that's where we come in. Much like Professor Oak, we are the ones that are going to show them the ropes and help them find their feet so that they are ready to go on their journey as Pokemon trainers or as college students. So it's really important that we show them that there's a certain way to act and a certain way to behave when they're in orientation and during their time in college. And this is going to be the first step to becoming that strong Pokemon trainer. So we're going to go ahead and get into the types of students, starting with the grass types. The grass types are going to be really quiet students that we really want to get out of their shells, but they just have a slower time interacting with the rest of the group.
The next type of student are the electric type students. These are the extremely nervous students who have a whole bunch of questions and just seem like a ball of nervous energy the entire time. Then we have our fire type students, which are the complete opposite of grass type students. They don't seem to stop talking and they're starting to become really disruptive and can kind of take over your entire group.
And finally, we have water type students. So the water type students are can also take over the group, but do so in a completely different way. These are the types of students that are too cool to be at that orientation and make sure that everybody around them knows it. Sometimes they can have the ability to take over a group, but with this conversation, hopefully we can prevent that from happening. So we're going to talk about all these types through the stage of dramaturgy, which is going to be a sociological explanation for why certain people behave in certain situations. So when you were imagining you were at orientation, you probably weren't acting like you would if you were at home, chilling with some friends, eating some ice cream, which is completely normal. And that would be your front stage persona. When you're at orientation, you want to be as comfortable as possible, but it's just not going to happen. And so you're going to behave in a certain way that you wouldn't be expecting to otherwise. The backstage persona is going to be where you are as most comfortable as possible. And that's also not ideal for orientation because we're not going to be able to learn anything during that time. So our role as an orientation leader is to find some sort of balance in between the two so that everybody gets as much as they can from that orientation.
To kind of help you understand dramaturgy a bit more, a really extreme version of dramaturgy can be seen by looking at Team Rocket from the Pokemon anime. So their entire goal in life is to take Pikachu away from Ash and take him to Giovanni. And they're going to be doing this by any means necessary, whether that's dressing up as a Gengar and a Tauros or just some weird looking police officers. They want to put out whatever first front stage persona that they believe will get them closest to Ash and have him feeling comfortable enough to hand over Pikachu. However, at the end of every episode, their true intentions are revealed, which sends them blasting off again.
So the first type we're going to talk about are grass types. And these are going to be the quiet types, but it's important to know that they're quiet and not shy. So usually when you're dealing with these types of Pokemon or students, you're probably going to be left wondering,
Why don't they want to talk?
So there's two trains of thoughts when interacting with this and dramaturgy. So the first one is that they're back in the first grade. They're not sure how to act and they want to make a good impression. And this is a completely new environment. So they're going to have their hands on their lips, their fingers on their lips, and their hands to their side. And they're going to make sure that they are making absolutely no trouble and calling no attention to themselves. The other type is to watch and learn. So they're going to see what other people do and then react accordingly. And hopefully they come out of their shells later on during that orientation. Some ways to ensure that they do come out of their shells is to meet them at their level. The best way to have grass types not talk at all during orientation is to come at them with the energy of 1,000 orientation leaders. So if you do that, you will see a student whose face resembles that of the Bulbasaur you see on your screen. Make sure that you don't do that. A golden rule that we have at orientation for UAB is to make sure that you are one step above them, not anymore, so that they are able to come up to your level without feeling overwhelmed. When they do decide to talk, make sure that you are an active listener and you value what they say, and so they feel like they are able to contribute to the conversation more and they're doing so confidently. Make sure that you encourage them to talk and not force them to talk because, again, you will get that Bulbasaur if you make them do something that they don't want to do. So some effective ways to get them to talk without forcing them to do so are active turn-based icebreakers, activities that make them move around or interact with a bunch of different people at one time will make sure that they are getting their blood pressure and heart rate up, and they are moving around as much as possible. Turn-based, we give them the floor to talk without forcing them to do so, which will make sure that they are comfortable. And if you see them being isolated from the group, make sure that you talk to them individually and just give them that encouraging push to get them working with the rest of the group again.
The next type of student that we're going to be discussing are the electric type students. And while some nerves are normal, these students have become so overwhelmed with their nerves that it's affecting how they're interacting with others. And this can leave you wondering,
why do they seem so nervous?
well, students coming in orientation have an idea in their head of how they want to come off to other students, and they've built this perfect persona of how they're going to be able to do that. And with this front page persona comes a whole bunch of rules and expectations that they've attached to it so intentionally that by the time they get to orientation, they are straight up overthinking everything, and it'll cause them to freeze up like this Pikachu over here. Another explanation for why they're so nervous is that they might be coming into this experience completely on their own. Maybe they're a first generation college student, or they are from out of state and have no friends or support system coming into your university with them. Another explanation is that they're having a serious case of stage fright. I mean, we've all experienced it to some degree, but for these students, it's becoming debilitating. And that's why you want to make sure that when interacting with these students that you treat them early. You know, don't let them sit there with as a nervous ball of scaredness. Talk to them, make them laugh, or tell an engaging story, just anything to get them out of their heads and having fun in orientation. It's important also to not overload these students with information. You still want to make sure that they're getting all of the essential information that they should be getting from orientation, but you want to give it to them in small and digestible chunks so that they're not too overwhelmed. Also, these students tend to come with a whole bunch of questions attached to them, so make sure to be patient with them when you're interacting, and that'll make them feel like they're not becoming a burden to you. Some activities that you can do to get them to open up in a group would be icebreakers at the beginning of the day. These activities will get them out of their heads right from the very beginning and show them that orientation is not as scary as it may seem and that they can actually interact with everyone else in the group and have some fun with it.
So before we move on, I want to address something that I feel affects every single orientation, regardless of where you're from, and that is this meme. So I feel like everybody has been sent this meme at some point in their life, and it is an expectation that every student comes to orientation with because of how popular it has become. Because of that, we have two different trains of thoughts and types of students that have this initial thought coming into orientation, and we're going to start with
the fire types. So these are the students who have taken those memes a bit too seriously, and they believe that this is exactly what is going to happen in orientation and is therefore how they should behave at orientation. Another explanation for their borderline disruptive behavior is that while they're just as nervous as everybody else, they kick it into overdrive instead of shutting down like the grass and electric type students. And so they decide to just mask all of their anxiety with a whole bunch of energy. Also, they could just be really excited to make friends and start college, but instead of coming off in like a normal way, they end up looking like this Charizard over here and kind of freaking some people out. This is why it's essential when interacting with these students that you model the correct amount of energy. But also, when you're modeling that energy, make sure to not put their fire out, or else they'll look sad like this poor Charmander over here. Like, that was such a sad episode. It makes me cry about it. So you want to make sure that you don't put out their fire, you just contain and direct it. Also, these students can tend to take up a whole lot of your time. And so you want to make sure that you know when to end the conversation with them so that the rest of your group doesn't feel isolated or ignored. And also, a great way to focus their energy, like we talked about earlier, is to have thought-provoking and turn-based icebreakers. Having them be turn-based will ensure that the fire-type students do not completely dominate your entire activity. And then having them be thought-provoking and asking questions about like starting college and things like that, it will focus that student's energy on the more information receiving side of orientation rather than the crazy fun side.
The final type of Pokemon type that we have are the water types. And the water types come with a certain type of vibe check. And if you fail that vibe check, you might be left wondering,
why don't they like me?
so it's not that they don't like you, it's that they're nervous and they're putting on the same type of reaction as the rest of the types. They're putting on a front, and their front is to not show that they are enjoying this experience at all because they want to seem cool. This is their first time making this first impression for the people around them, and they want to make sure it's the best one that they think it will be. And because of that, they show no emotions. The other train of thought is that they are nervous, but instead of showing it, they just shut down. And because of that, they show no fear or no sign of life because of it. When interacting with these types, it's important to know that you may not be able to get them to interact during orientation, but orientation is only the first step, and the rest of their college journey is what we really care about. So when you're interacting with them, just try to find their interests, see what they're wanting to do with their time in college, and then try to appeal to those interests. Downplay the energy and talk of the experience. They should know leaving orientation that that was the time that they get to talk to as many people as they possibly could to make those first impressions, to make those new friends, to find those organizations that they want to be a part of, and those professors, places, resources that they need to be as successful as they can be. When you're working with this, they could also take over the group, and that's why it's important that when you have a water type in your group to avoid the cringe, because one Squirtle with some sunglasses can turn into 5, and now you've lost your entire group, and that's something you definitely don't want to do. So when you're working with these types, you want to make sure that you avoid the word icebreaker activity as much as possible. Just go into it without talking about it. Just go straight into the instructions and try to catch them off guard. When you're doing this, a really good activity that works for water types is pair and share activities, where you talk about their interests and you pair people up who have similar interests so that they have their own conversation, and you are just monitoring to make sure that the conversation is happening.
So now that we've discussed the 4 general types of students, I want y'all to think about what type of student you think you relate to the most, and also like what type of student you relate to the most. I know personally, I relate to the fire type students a whole bunch. I am a bundle of energy and I love talking, and sometimes it can be a bit overbearing. I acknowledge that and I'm trying to work on it. And for that reason, it's a little bit harder for me to interact with water type students because I don't understand why they're not as excited about orientation as I am at 7 a.m., you know?
I feel like I do, and that's what's making me a grass type. I'm definitely part of that watch and learn mentality because I don't want to be the person that jumps out into the crowd and does something and then just gets looked at. That's a completely normal train of thought, but some people just don't have it. And I envy those fire types and also find it really hard to work with sometimes because of that. So it's important to know that if we took a poll of every single orientation team, you're going to have some sort of even distribution of every single type. And that's because the strengths vary by person, and that person may be strong with one thing but weak with another. And that leads us to our last type, which is
the dragon types. And hopefully through this presentation, you'll develop strategies that will help you find your inner dragon. Dragon types are resistant to, you guessed it, water, grass, electric, and fire type students. Crazy how that worked out. By utilizing the strategies that we've discussed and also developing your own throughout your time as an orientation leader, you're going to become resistant to the challenges that you may have faced before when interacting with students that you might not relate to as much.
But while you are throwing these challenges away like this Dragonite here, you're also going to have to embrace these challenges like you see the one here. So the best way to do that is to know that you are also expressing some sort of dramaturgy and that you want to be the most positive, approachable form of yourself so that students can ask you those difficult questions and be comfortable and trust that you will give them the best answers. Another reason that dramaturgy applies to OLs is because we have a jersey that we wear for our university and we have to model what a student going to that university is going to be like, and we are essentially the first people that the students coming in see with that jersey on their back. So we have to make sure that we model what is perfect for that university that you go to so that that student knows what is expected of them. The only way that the student can envision themselves in your shoes is if you maintain that authenticity. So having that personality and finding that balance between being a professional and being that fun person that you actually are translates into your personal orientation self.
As Jalen mentioned, you want to make sure that you're your authentic self when interacting with students. And also remember that you were chosen for your role as an orientation leader because of your unique personality. An orientation leader team is built intentionally to ensure that every student coming into your university can imagine themselves in the shoes of at least one orientation leader. With this in mind, it's important for you to not only know the personalities that are represented on your team, but also to utilize each of your team members. For example, if you have a water type student in your group and you're not a water type, then you need to know who the Squirtles on your team are. By connecting a student that you cannot seem to relate to that well with an orientation leader who can, you'll be making that student feel more comfortable and welcomed at your university. By having a diverse orientation leader team, your university is setting themselves up the best to catch them all.
Well, that's the end of our presentation. We hope you enjoyed it and we hope you learned something along the way. So one thing to leave you guys with is this QR code. It will take you to a link which will take you to a Google Doc, which we have put in certain types of activities that we find useful at our university. We have left it open to editing, so if you want to add your own ideas or activities, feel free to do so. It would help anybody that uses this link.
Again, thank you so much for coming to our presentation. Stay safe and healthy and have an awesome day or night.
Goodbye.
Bye.